Alright, let's get back to chapter 5 of our series where we meet Squanto. Now, if you're new to this series, then welcome aboard. We're traveling through time and space to explore how people have farmed, hunted, and fished throughout history. And there are lots of stories that go with the food history. So if you like to eat and learn about cool stuff, consider subscribing because it really helps us out. Now, in chapter 5, we're exploring the intersection of Native American history with European colonization. This is a complicated topic, and it's one that I feel like we need to discuss more on this channel. But for today, we're going to focus on one man named Squanto. His story is pretty incredible, and as far as I can tell, he was probably the most well-traveled Native American of his time. He was kidnapped by Europeans, traveled all over Europe, learned several languages, returned to North America, and then helped the very people who had kidnapped him survive. And he did all of this before most people in the United States were born. This is a lot to unpack, and we try to do it in less than 10 minutes. So let's do it. Squanto was born around 1595 in what is now Massachusetts. He was part of a group of Native Americans known as the Patuxet, which means people of the sunrise. And when he was a kid, his village was attacked by another Native American tribe, the Pequot. They killed almost everyone in his village and took Squanto and some other kids captive. The Pequots marched their captives south to a place called Block Island, which is just off the coast of Rhode Island. Then they put Squanto on a ship bound for Spain. He was only about 12 or 13 years old. There's not a whole lot of historical documentation from this point, but we think Squanto spent some time living with the Spanish and then the Portuguese, and during this time, he picked up several languages along the way. For instance, he learned English from the English fishermen who came to New England every year to fish. He learned Spanish and Portuguese from his captors, and we know that he knew Dutch when he returned to New England, because he actually lived briefly among the Dutch colony at Fort Orange, which is present-day Albany, New York. But how did he get back to New England? Well, that part of his story is a little murky. Some historians say he simply got tired of living among the Dutch and walked back to New England. Other historians say he was actually sent back by the Dutch as a spy. Either way, he ended up back in New England, speaking a bunch of different languages and having a really unique perspective on the world. When he returned to New England, Squanto probably didn't speak any Patuxet anymore, and his own people, the Patuxet, were basically gone. The English colonists who arrived in 1620 would later write that Squanto was one of only 2 survivors of his tribe. But I don't really trust that because we know for a fact that there were other Native American tribes in the area. But Squanto did probably face a lot of prejudice from those tribes, since he looked different and had a hard time speaking their language. But fortunately, Squanto met a guy named Isaac Allerton. Now, Allerton was one of the original 51 English settlers who survived the Mayflower voyage, and he was basically adopted by Squanto's friend Massasoit, the leader of the Wampanoag tribe. And through Massasoit, Squanto was able to reconnect with his roots and learn about the land and its bounty. According to the colonists, Squanto taught them how to plant corn, catch fish with nets made of cedar branches, and collect food during different seasons. In particular, the colonists were pretty bad at collecting food during the winter, and Squanto showed them how to harvest shellfish and dig 4 tubers called Jerusalem artichokes. And he also showed them how to tap maple trees for their sap and preserve it for eating during the winter. Now, this is an interesting point because the English colonists were used to getting a lot of their calories from meat. But as the author of Plymouth Plantation wrote, the Indians showed us how to take the small fish which swarm in our rivers, and by drying and powdering them, make a convenient and wholesome diet for man and beast. This is an interesting cultural shift because when the Pilgrims first arrived, they didn't think much of eating fish. Now, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows between the colonists and the Native Americans. There was definitely a lot of tension. And there was even a war between the colonists and a different Native American tribe called the Narragansett. But Squanto's friend Massasoit helped keep the peace. And here's where things get weird. In 1623, Massasoit got sick and he asked Squanto and another interpreter named John Danforth to come help him. According to a letter written by John Winthrop, Squanto spoke with Massasoit's tribe in the Patuxet language, and this makes me wonder if the Patuxet weren't totally wiped out, as the English colonists believed. Anyway, Squanto visited Massasoit every day while he was sick and apparently helped nurse him back to health. But after Massasoit recovered, he died a few months later. And once again, Squanto helped ease the tension between the colonists and the Wampanoag, by asking forgiveness for the things that happened after Massasoit's death. Squanto continued to act as a mediator between the two groups until his death in 1670. During this time, he helped negotiate treaties, mediate conflicts, and teach the colonists how to live in this new land. But he also worked as an explorer, a hunter, and a farmer, and we don't really know much about these aspects of his life, except that he probably had a farm near the settlement of Plymouth. In fact, there is a pretty great story about Squanto and his farm that shows how well he adapted to this new world. So one day, Squanto was plowing his field and he came across a buried pot of gold. And instead of keeping the gold, he called the English governor over so they could divide it up according to English law. That might sound stupid, but remember, Squanto had been kidnapped as a young boy and sold into slavery. He knew firsthand what it was like to be dominated and exploited by Europeans. And maybe he didn't want his newfound freedom to be taken away. Maybe he wanted to integrate into the culture that had adopted him. Either way, Squanto's life is an amazing story of resilience, adaptation, and cultural exchange. I mean, he went from being a victim of the very people he was helping to a respected member of the community. But there's a lot more to his story than that. And honestly, I could talk about it for days. But to wrap this video up, let's think about Squanto's legacy. He's remembered as the man who taught the Pilgrims how to survive in the New World. But he was more than that. He was a teacher, a diplomat, and a bridge between two cultures. He helped open the door for peaceful relations between the colonists and the Native Americans, and without him, who knows what would have happened. You know, I am kind of curious if Squanto would have preferred to live among the Native Americans or the colonists. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. For me, Squanto represents the best and worst of European colonization. On the one hand, he was kidnapped and exploited, but on the other hand, he was able to use his experiences to help others. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new. Now, if you want to learn more about the history of food, farming, and fishing, you can subscribe to our channel or check out our website. We've got tons of cool stuff there, including an online store where you can buy our coffee. All the proceeds from our coffee go directly to the production of this series. If you want to support our work, you can also check out our Patreon page. Well, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy farming, fishing, and foraging.